Hello everyone, this is Jaime from the MidPointe Library System, and I'm going to walk you through painting a portrait of your pet. Whether you have a cat, dog, turtle, fish, this should be sort of some way for you to create your own piece at home. And you don't have to have these supplies. You can always use whatever you have. But what I'll be using and showing you today, you can always print off pictures at one of our locations, except for Monroe currently. But you would be able to print off from your phone, and any staff member that would be at a location could help you figure that out. But what I decided to do is show you what's called the grid method to drawing, and it kind of helps people with resizing images, whether you need it to be enlarged or to shrink it down. And I also feel like if you're not real comfortable with drawing, that this is sort of almost a mathematical way to approach a drawing. So I took a picture of my boyfriend's dog. Her name is Chloe, and it was a shot I had taken of her that I absolutely love. And so it's just a cell phone image, and I had printed it off so that it was, I wanted it, since it's square, I wanted it to be about 5.5 inches wide and tall. And what I was planning on doing was doubling the size of this. So when you start the grid method, you take your reference image and you want to divide it up into grids, because typically on your reference image you'll want to do like a 1-inch grid, and it just makes it easier for you to figure out enlarging or making it smaller. Typically most people are going to enlarge because you might have a canvas or a wood panel that's a lot larger, and you're trying to figure out placement of your reference onto your piece. Now my piece of paper is actually a watercolor paper, and you probably have seen me use it frequently in other videos before. And it's one of my favorites. It's Cansen's watercolor. This one just happens to be an 11 by 15 that I cut down to be 11 by 11. Because when you double the 5.5, it equals 11 inches. So I already pre-cut my paper, and on my image I had actually already drew 1-inch squares. So you can see here I drew with pencil, and I always feel like pencil's the best to use because it kind of gives a little bit of a shimmer, so even if it's in a dark area you can see it a little better on top of that dark area. You are more than welcome though to go over top of your lines with like a white gel pen or a white paint pen if you just have too much trouble seeing the pencil. But I wanted to start the inch marks. Seeing how you would do the grid is you would start where you want the grid to start. So I did want to use this side of the image to start the 1 inch. And then I just marked off 1-inch marks above the picture and right below. And then I just connected them across the picture, and then I turned it and did the same thing. So you'll notice that since my picture is only 5.5, that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full boxes that are 1 inch, and then I have 1/2 of an inch left within the 6 box. So on your bigger sheet of paper, like my 11-inch, you'll do the same thing. You'll want to set it up so that that far right box is only 1/2 of an inch. And you'll notice on the bottom of the image, since it's a square, it has the same thing going on, that it's only 1/2 of an inch at the bottom. So when you go to your main image, and if it's a canvas, you usually can draw on it with pencil. Try to keep it as light as possible because you really don't want your grid to stay on your main final piece. So what a lot of times I would do is once I get the grid and draw my piece, then that's when I might start erasing the grid. And because depending on how you paint, you may not cover up all of those lines and you may not want the grid to show. Obviously that's a choice that you have to make, but the grid is mainly just to give you structure to figure out where to place the drawing itself. So like I said, since we're doubling the size, these 1-inch blocks become 2 inches on your large block, but still the same idea. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks at the top, and the 6th one is 1/2 of an inch. And I did the same kind of thing where I line up my ruler, mark the 2-inch marks all the way across, go down to the bottom, do the same thing, and then I connect those marks with a line going all the way across. And the only thing you need to keep in mind is your 1/2 box is on the right side and on the bottom of this piece in particular. Yours might have a different situation, but that's what mine is set up to do. So then when you are ready, then you're able to look at each box and draw your subject. So cute little Chloe here, you would take a look, and I always feel weird about starting in the top left when their face is more in the center. So since we have the grid, it doesn't matter where you really start. And I'm just using a regular, what's called a 2B pencil. It's kind of a softer lead, but I still want to keep my lines fairly light. And of course, just have an eraser as well. But her left, or really her right eye, that's on the left side of the piece, is in the 3rd box, 2nd one down. So within this area, you can see is her eye. Now she has kind of a dark lid around her eye, so I will take that in consideration, but you just see the relationship of where her eye is within that box on the image, and then that's how you're going to draw it on there. So the edge of her actual eye is kind of right in the middle there, or right on that line. In fact, I need to go down a little bit. And there's definitely hair and little fur and everything that's going every which way, because she kind of has little tufts of hair that almost act like eyelashes on her eye. And that's completely fine. Like, we'll paint more of that kind of thing in. Now, obviously, you wouldn't have to paint if you didn't want to, but today that's what I'm going to show. You could technically do all of the line work with your pencil and then go in and do it do the line work back in ballpoint, or you could use a marker and then do just watercolor instead of acrylic that I'm showing you today. It could be almost like a coloring book option where you're inking all of your line work. Or you could keep it as a drawing and don't even have to paint it at all either. This is entirely up to you. But if it makes sense, then you kind of just look around within your box, see what else is going on. She's got some swoopies that I'm not too concerned about drawing in. I'm more concerned about the outline, since we'll take care of the texture of the hair when we paint. But of course she's really hairy on her snout, so I do kind of have to show some of that, but you can see that I might be slightly off, but that's fine. And you can always kind of adjust as you go. It doesn't have to be exact. She has a little bit of her front leg interrupting the box. And you just keep going to each box. So I hope that makes sense. But you just keep looking at the image and then where you're at within the box, add in a few lines. You can always erase them, especially if you don't really drag into your paper. You want to keep it pretty light. And I would focus more on like the animal itself. So here I already have her drawn out. And about this time, this is where I like having an image that doesn't have the grid on it, because I may want to see some of the details that the grid might hide. And I just want to have options so that I can see it really well. But what I like about the image is it's mostly focused in on her, and I'm not going to bother with drawing the pots that are behind her, because I actually just want to leave the background pretty plain. Like I said, my subject is her, and I want the focus to be more on her. And obviously your image would be a little different for your animal, so you do what you think will look the cutest or the way you want it to feel. And I probably did draw her a little more detailed than I needed to, but this would be a great start to one that would be inked, I think, but gives me enough information to know where everything's at and to get ready to paint. And your choice is to go ahead and paint full color if you want, but I wanted to kind of show you an alternative and something that would be a little faster in a way, or a way to introduce you into doing a color image. What I'm going to do is more of a monochromatic color scheme, and that usually means you pick a color like black and you would mix white with it or another color. So what I've chosen to do, instead of just doing the typical black and gray and whites for a monochromatic scheme, I chose what's called alizarin crimson. So this will be my main color. And then you want to be able to get different colors with this paint by adding white or varying amounts of white. And you can use black, but I prefer to use what's called Payne's gray, because it's still really dark, but it's not as dark as black, because I was always taught that black most times will just flatten an image, and when you want it to be a little more lifelike and have a little more vibrance, to try to bring other colors that are not just straight black. And you really could even just use what's called Winsor blue, because it's a pretty deep blue. And you could mix that and use that as like your black. And it would give you a lot of variation of color, but still kind of keep a really cool feel to the alizarin crimson. And it just gives you other options. And especially if you're not really looking to spend a whole lot of money, if you do monochromatic, it just means you only have to buy like 3 tubes of paint and work from there. And I think it's always good to invest in a couple of really nice brushes. Like something like this, I like having a lot of the more round brushes so that I can get some smaller details. But it's also nice to have a nice large square brush so you can cover a lot of ground. Because obviously you're not going to paint a barn with this, but we've got a pretty good size paper here, and I always have a tendency to pick like 2 brushes for an entire piece, and that's what I tend to stay with. But that's up to you as well on how much you want to spend, or if you're just trying to use what you have. But and if you have the capabilities of this, like printing out an extra piece, and if your photo with it being full color is kind of throwing you off, you can always grab your photo and bring it into the library and have it print a grayscale. And even though we won't be doing grayscale, we still have kind of a monochromatic feel, and it might give you an idea for how to shade your animal or your pet. and kind of give you a variation, because sometimes color can be very distracting and you may not know really how to look at her and divide her up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of move some of these paints out of the way so that you can still see my color image and my black and white in the corner there. And then let's see, I'll probably grab my larger round brush because, like I said, I'm very stuck on one brush sometimes. And this is really a good time to kind of lay down your underpainting and get some of your darks, maybe some of your darks and some of your mid-tones. So where she's probably pretty dark is on this side of her face, and kind of lay down some of the footwork for that. So again, this is going to be my main color, and I'm going to grab some of it. And this is a good way to kind of practice some of your mixing without having to do too many colors at once. So since I'm wanting to mess with the darker side, I'm going to grab some of that dark Payne's Gray, and you'll notice that it turns it kind of a purple. And then, depending on your comfort level, I would insist on covering your whole piece pretty well with paint. I know some people get really nervous about doing this part and they'll stay in one section. It would probably help you if you want to move from one section to another to just start from the piece that's the furthest back, because then her head on here would have all the swoopies from her fur. But like I said, right now I'm kind of just establishing dark areas, and I just chose to do the hair kind of in this area, because we can always use white to help kind of brighten it back up. And just kind of looking at my image. And you may be looking at this going, what is she doing? This looks terrible. But there's always an ugly stage in painting where it may not even look like the piece at all. I don't even worry about it, because you'll gradually learn how to walk your way through the painting. And when you start feeling like the paint has a hard time moving across the paper, you can always wet your brush and kind of get it watered down. And that also, I would also encourage not to use a ton of paint when you're kind of setting up the underpainting. And she's kind of dark back here, so I'm kind of using the same tone. She has a little bit of a belly. She's a little dark on this side. And it's fine to have almost a watercolor, watered down acrylic. And something like this does take time, so you won't be able to see the whole process of painting because there's just not enough time in the day for you to see every little thing, but at least you can get an idea of how you can start one. This is a little darker. And what's nice with acrylics is you can just keep building it up and building up your layers. And that will help increase either more realism or just give a feel for the shape. She kind of has a little dark up in there. Obviously her eyes are a lot darker, so I'm gonna kind of keep it more on the black side or on my dark gray. But yeah, this just takes a lot of time to just build colors and build shapes. You could really honestly even keep it in just the underpainting stage if you wanted to. But I encourage you to mess around and experiment. Because Rome, I know this is used a lot, but Rome wasn't built in a day. And it does take time. And sometimes you need to just get some paint down before you see your different values. And then you realize, oh, I need to get that so much darker than what I have. But a lot of times you have to get some stuff down first. And I could switch to like this square brush so I can cover more ground, because I would say her main fur over here would be kind of the original color because it's pretty bright, and you can always draw within it some of your whites to bring your brighter brights in there. But like I said, we're kind of just getting some color down. And like I said, I'm covering some of my pencil line, and I'm okay with that. Because you can always fix some of your drawing later. Just the fact that you did draw it, you'll realize that you know a lot of where it's at just from doing this kind of thing over and over again. It gets kind of shaded over there, so. But I'm just getting color down. And it may look kind of weird, and it looks like it's getting weirder, but but it'll help establish what you want to do. And I am kind of trying to move my brush in the way her fur is, instead of just doing real flat color. Kind of grab some of that gray again, so I can get a real dark, because I've got some shade over here, some shadow. And you can tell I'm not being too terribly careful, just kind of knocking in some color. And like I said, it probably looks insane right now. And her back here is gonna be kind of a lot darker than her face, because her face is toward me. The funny part is her tail's only in that top left corner, and she does actually have a little bit of like more whitish looking up there, hardly any shadow, which is funny. Kind of a brighter. What's nice about the watercolor paper is it will handle the water pretty well with just acrylic. And her foot gets pretty bright, so I'm not going to get too heavy with the paint right there. And like I said, her tail's pretty light, so but to show, like, once you kind of move from the under painting, and I'll kind of, and obviously I'm rushing this a bit so that you guys can see some of the process as it goes. I really kind of want to focus in on her eye. And this is kind of where you could potentially bring in other colors if you're having some trouble to mix with the red, if you're having some trouble getting a variation in your color, and you're just struggling with making sure there's darks and lights and midtones. It really just takes a lot of practice and learning how you work. And like with this left eye, it's pretty dark, so it's hard to tell, at least in the image, where exactly some of her features are. So sometimes you have to kind of just draw it in, whether it's there or not. And you're gonna see me kind of stopping at this point. I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, she's not painting the whole thing. It's okay. It's okay. Breathe in. We only have so much time together, but I will show you what Chloe looks at the end. And you'll see how I kind of finished her off. I kept the background pretty simple, but you can always add some doodles, or just have little fun flowers painted all around, or whatever you like to do. It would be fun to keep it rather abstract, but you can always change the background color, kind of like I did. Decided to do blue just to pop her as like a reddish pink, sort of pulls her forward with the darker blue background. And that's something entirely up to you, of course. You'll just have to build up layers and keep working to get a final piece out of yours. I know it seems like a lot to take on, but don't feel bad about experimenting and figuring out your process, because you really could just keep it as simple as pie. You could just keep it as the drawing. You don't have to paint it. But I want to encourage you to try something new. You can jump on our website and get on Creative Bug. Using your library card, you can see other classes. YouTube's a great knowledge base to figure out what to paint or how to paint and what to use, just to see how other artists work. We have tons of books in our system that you can learn acrylic painting, oil painting, watercolor painting, or even just learning lettering. The world is your oyster at this point, so you can really do all sorts of stuff and be able to sort of watch instructional videos and get a good grasp of how your process is, because every artist will be completely different. Like, this may just be my process. It may not be your process. So don't feel like it has to look like that image. You can take a little bit of artist liberties and do your own thing. Just try to be kind to yourself. Sometimes that's hard to do as a creative person or a person who wants to try to be creative. Don't beat up yourself. It takes a lot of practice and time, and a lot of things can't be rushed with art, especially when you're wanting to make it look a certain way. And but once you get a picture or the way you want it to look, slap it on your refrigerator or get a frame for it, put it up in the house, or maybe it's a gift for someone. Just let it shine in its own way, and even if you think it's not great, because as you keep practicing, the better it's going to get. And I appreciate you guys spending the time walking through this with me. The grid method will be super useful for anyone who is even just messing with a portrait, like a picture of your baby, of your grandmother, grandfather, whoever, honestly. It gives you a great way to break up your drawing into a painting, and also helps you out with sizing. But thank you so much for spending the time with me today, and I wish you an awesomely creative day. Thanks. Bye.